On this inside line, I'm going to show you a very convenient way to get power while you're out on the trail and what I've been using this compact charging station for the past 5 months. Okay, let's get to it. This is the Delta Mini, and it comes from a company well known in this space, EcoFlow. Now it weighs just under 24 pounds, is around 15 inches long, and a touch over 7 inches wide. It's incredibly compact, but very powerful. In fact, this particular unit has 882 watt hours and can pump out 1400 watts continuously. This means it is powerful enough to run nearly any appliance in your home and has enough watt hours to do so for quite some time. Now up front you will find a 100 watt USB-C port along with 3 additional USB outlets. On the opposite side you will find 5 AC plugs along with one 12 volt car adapter port. To monitor just how much power is coming out, there is a nice digital display up front that will not only tell you the specific watts that are being absorbed, but it'll give you an indicator of how much time you have left based on that usage. So my primary goals for this unit was I needed something that would power my ARB fridge freeze. I was hoping to get about 48 hours out of it, and I'll get more into that in a minute. And I needed something that was powerful enough to power camera gear. I film with a lot of cameras and a variety of types of batteries, and some of these things just really burn through quickly, and I'm constantly having to recharge on the go. And that means if you're driving a Jeep or really anything, you got to keep key on power, so the vehicle has to be on. This kind of took a lot of that anxiety away. I can keep my stuff going regardless if I'm out filming a feature or hiking on the trail. My batteries are back, inside of the Jeep charging. So that's really, those were the primary things. I have used it for other stuff, but since our channel really is more automotive based, I figure I'm going to dive into really what I use this thing for when I'm out on the trail and on the go. So let's get into that. Now, one of the most common uses I have for this is to power my ARB fridge freeze. Now, this is a 37 quart unit and it's not very new. I want to say this one's probably about 5 years old and it's been fairly trouble-free, been happy with it. The big thing to note here is how much this thing draws. Now, this particular cooler will draw about 70 watts when it's getting to operating temperature. So like right now, when I originally plugged this in, it was about 49 degrees. It says on here the display we're pulling about 67, 69 watts. And at that, it is going to give us about 12 hours of charging time. So if I'm going out for a day trip, that's fine. But here's really the good news. Once it gets down to around 32 degrees, which is where I keep it, generally speaking, you can get about 30 some odd hours out of just running the cooler off the battery. I did sort of a garage test because I was worried initially how long I was really going to get out of it. And my best sort of case scenario has been about 36 hours from start to finish. And the way to get the most out of it is you can go ahead and plug this fridge into your house, get it down to temperature, then all this thing has to do is constantly maintain. Now, if this fridge is inside of the Jeep versus like in the bed of the Jeep out in the sun, it definitely makes a difference with how much this thing is kicking on and off. But for the most part, it fit what I needed it to do. I do wish I could have got a little bit more hours out of it. I was hoping to get like maybe 3 days of continuous use out of the cooler without having to recharge this, but that's not going to happen. So I do have to recharge it. I am going to show you how I do that here in just a minute. But overall, for my day trip camping needs, this thing has been great. It's got plenty of power to not worry about draining this thing out completely just off of the cooler, and I can run batteries and things like that and not worry about recharging anything. So that absolutely not an issue. I know different coolers will pull different amounts, but for this 37 quart ARB fridge freeze, like I say, it's pretty consistent at when it needs to get to temp, it's usually pulling about 70 watts, and then to sustain it, I've seen it as low as 0.85 and as much of a draw about 7. That's usually where it kind of floats in between. So let's get into some of the other uses for this thing. Now I want to talk a little bit about charging my batteries and my experience with that. So most of my camera batteries, especially the larger camera stuff, is going to use one of the AC ports on the back. Now you have to be really careful here. Thankfully most of the plugs are fairly compact, but if you have a battery pack that's like comes with an SLR where it's kind of bulky, you're going to block off a lot of these plates very quickly. So you can't really use those. You need to make sure that you're getting them a kind of a compact cord so you can get it away from the machine so you can utilize more spots. Now, generally speaking, I can have 2 V-Pack batteries charging, some drone batteries on one side, and I can use USB stuff on the other to charge some of my more compact like action cams and things like that. And it's worked fine. I've had a ton of gear charging it once on this thing, and I've never come close to robbing its peak output. That's been great. Neat feature of this is you can actually have this thing plugged into your vehicle and getting charged while you're charging all your other stuff. So if this thing happens to be low and you want to start putting some battery back in it, you can do that, and that's really handy. So in terms of charging the gear, I would say it's very effective. I probably use way more power than the average person for charging all my batteries. I can have multiple things going at once, which is really handy. And one of the things that I like it for, because it makes my life a lot easier, is I can have this stuff charging when I'm out on the trail, because this thing does fit behind the seat, and I can just have the chargers kind of sitting on the floor of the Jeep. And by the time I get home, or I need to go shoot something else or set up something, like I've already got another battery charged and I don't have to worry about it. So for me, this is a big time saver. So it made it a very solid investment for that. And I can still have the cooler plugged in, especially once it's at optimum temperature, and it's barely pulling anything. The V-Pack batteries are what really burn it out more than anything else. So for that, it's good. So now let's dive into actually how do you charge this unit. Now, EcoFlow provides you with 3 ways to get power back into this machine. You can either use the standard AC cord, the 12-volt car adapter cord, or a solar power cord. Now, let's talk about the fastest way to get this thing charged, and that is using the AC cord that goes directly to your house. And with that, you're going to be able to get this machine from 0 to 100% in under 2 hours. And that's using the fast feature option on the back. Now, if you want to slow this down and preserve the life of these lithium-ion batteries a little bit more, the way to do that is through an app that EcoFlow provides that allows you to modify the parameters for this machine so the wattage comes in a bit slower. The other neat features about the app, it allows you to control each port individually so you can see what type of power draw is coming or turn off one of those ports. Admittedly, I rarely ever use the app, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. Now, I love the fact that I can recharge this thing so quickly. It makes it extremely handy. You're talking about bringing that cord along, and if you're on a road trip or if you have any ability to get to power at a gas station, if you can sit for even 30 minutes, this thing can power super fast, much faster than if you have to power it by your car. Your car is going to give you between 3 to 7 hours to get this thing back to 100%. It just depends on the power output of the vehicle and realistically if you have drain coming from it. Now, the car will do its job in that if I need that to preserve this battery life for the cooler overnight and the batteries overnight, I can keep this thing plugged into the car, or I can recharge it as soon as I'm cranking up for the next day and I'm going to another, wheeling location, and I can have this thing recharging and not worry about it for the night. So it is a very handy cord that I do use. One thing that I wasn't sure if I would use was the solar, because they don't send you a solar panel, they just send you a solar cord. And initially I thought, I'm not going to need a solar. I don't want one more thing to haul around with me. That's silly. And then I got the unit, And I realized that on these longer camping trips that I have, especially days where I'm going to go all day and all night without having, cranking up the car, I'm going to need something to eke out a little bit more power so I don't have to worry about it. So what I ended up doing is getting 260 watt solar panels from EcoFlow. And the reason I'd got two is I thought, or it basically said you can use two to get to that 300 watt maximum input using solar. So I thought, oh, I'll get two solar panels. That'll be smart. No big deal. What I found is this, is that one is a pretty big unit. You can see it behind me. It's not big in the case, and the case actually acts as like a prop for it. So once you set it up, you can use that to, position it around. But two is a lot to set up. And what I have found is realistically, I wish one panel would pump out that type of power, and usually I just use one panel. And the good feature, or the good news about that, is one panel is very efficient in these things, and it'll usually offset the cooler and some other small battery that I have going. So if I'm out on the beach, or if I'm not doing a huge drain on this thing, I can still get roughly like 130 watts coming in, and I'm nowhere near that for the most part pulling down on this thing. It's really nice. Now, as I mentioned, my primary uses for the EcoFlow unit were the cooler, a handful of camping accessories, and my camera batteries. And for that, I've been very happy. But I do think it's worth mentioning that I occasionally use it for my fully electric dirt bike, the SurRon. And the reason is, SurRon batteries are removable, and they recommend to get the most life out of them to only keep them at about 80% charge and not at 100%. And so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll have the main battery that I'm going to be starting out my day riding on already at 100%, and then I will use the EcoFlow to top this off to 100% on the way, and that way by the time I'm ready to swap these things out, it's balanced and I don't have to worry about an issue with that, and I've got plenty of power left with that unit to keep my cooler going and not have an issue there. Now, it's worth noting that I was curious to see like how much battery I could get out of that unit to fill back up one of these. And if you're just using that unit to charge this, I can go from 20% in this battery to 60%. So that's 40% increase, that's a good distance on the SurRon. You can still go and play for quite a bit of time, but then you've got to recharge that thing. And if you're not close to a power outlet, obviously that's going to take a while. So maybe not ideal for this, but I have used it. Really, it works well for topping them off, especially if I forget to do it the night before. And I can still keep that thing going. So it's a pretty handy feature. So I usually will bring a SurRon charger with me just in case. And again, if you've got the solar panel feeding into that thing while I'm out riding during the day, it's constantly getting power back in. Even if it's not perfect power, I can put this thing where if it's getting 40 watts, it's fine. It's better than nothing, and let it feed the machine to get it going a little bit. Thankfully, that cooler just doesn't draw a ton, so I can really eke out a lot out of it. So that's really it. I have had to use it a couple other times for some odd things. I've used it for lighting up some backyard stuff for my kids, and I've used it once for when we lost power for a few hours for the cooler, but primarily it's not for the house. It's a neat machine. You can do a lot with it. I think it's a good value for everything you're getting. It still seems cheaper to me than putting dual batteries in all my off-road rigs. So for that, it's great. The fact that it's obviously not a gas generator, you can put it in any car, and it's small enough that it's not going to take up a ton of room. That's definitely awesome. I wish the solar panel and the size that they have it was more powerful, so I could get more wattage out of it, because bringing two, it's just not something that I like to do that often. But that's really my only complaint. It's easy to use. It gives really nice consistent power, even with huge draws of stuff like this. So I think if you're looking for something like that, it's definitely worth doing. Nice little overland thing that you can take with you. So that's really it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it, found it informative. Be sure to leave me a comment below. Let me know what you're thinking. If you got any questions for me, you can always find me at Ali Mansour Editor on Instagram. And until then, hope you guys are staying safe, and I got to get back to working on this Jeep. So Take care. See ya.